Bonjour tout le monde. Bienvenue à tous. Good morning everyone. Welcome. Mon prénom est Gabrielle Lamontagne. Je serai la modératrice aujourd'hui pour le point de presse avec Monsieur le ministre Stephen Guilbeault. Good morning everyone and welcome to the media availability. My name is Gabrielle Lamontagne and I will be moderating the event today, which will be followed by a moderating Q&A. I will turn to the floor to the Minister of Environment and Climate Change Canada, the Honorable Stephen Guilbeault. Je cède maintenant la parole au ministre de l'Environnement et du Changement climatique, l'honorable Monsieur Stephen Guilbeault. C'est à vous, Monsieur le ministre.
Merci beaucoup, Gabrielle. Bonjour et merci à toutes et à tous de vous joindre à cet appel pour parler de la prochaine conférence des Nations Unies sur le climat, la COP26, qui débute ce dimanche à Glasgow. Alors, mon nom est Stephen Guilbeault et je suis honoré et c'est un véritable privilège pour moi que le Premier ministre m'ait demandé de servir la population canadienne à titre de ministre de l'Environnement et du Changement climatique. Plusieurs d'entre vous me connaissez de ma carrière précédente comme militant sur la lutte contre les changements climatiques à l'extérieur du gouvernement. Et on en a beaucoup parlé au cours des derniers jours, mais évidemment, c'est avec un nouveau rôle que j'approche mon militantisme maintenant et que je serai à Glasgow comme chef de la délégation canadienne. First of all, what I want to say is that it's clear to more and more Canadians that the climate crisis is real. It's the fight of our lives. And since 2015, it has been a whole of government effort from the Government of Canada. Every member of Cabinet has been involved. And over the past 6 years, Canada has come a long way to turn around what was, frankly, not a very good record when we arrived in 2015. Today, thanks to the efforts of first Catherine McKenna and then Jonathan Wilkinson, Canada has one of the world's most detailed and credible climate plan, including the second most stringent carbon pricing system in the world. And Canada's Parliament has legislated requirements to keep up the progress. Mais soyons clairs, personne ici ne crie victoire. Nous savons à quel point il reste encore beaucoup de travail à faire. En fin de semaine, lorsque je me rendrai à Glasgow, j'assisterai à ma 19e conférence de l'ONU sur les changements climatiques, mais ce sera effectivement la première fois que j'y représenterai le Canada. Et je suis profondément humble et conscient de ma responsabilité envers tous les Canadiens et les Canadiennes. Je suis fier de mon travail passé en tant que militant écologiste. La communauté d'activistes et les ONG jouent un rôle très important en attirant l'attention du public sur les grands défis et en demandant des comptes au gouvernement. Ils préparent le terrain pour que nos gouvernements aillent encore plus loin et plus vite dans des grands défis que nous traversons. I'm very aware that those activists will be holding my feet to the fire. I welcome their attention and focus, but I also know that I work for all Canadians and must make this transition work for everyone. Because when we look across Canada, it is the energy-producing regions that have the most potential to gain by getting the climate fight right. And we do have to get it right. L'économie de l'avenir sera une économie verte. Et c'est ce que nous ont dit les Canadiens et les Canadiennes lors de la dernière élection, d'un océan à l'autre. C'est ce dont les gens se soucient profondément de ce qu'il arrivera à notre planète. Et ils se soucient également de la question des changements climatiques. L'une des premières tâches de la nouvelle mairesse de Calgary sera d'ailleurs de déclencher l'urgence climatique. C'est pourquoi je suis très heureux de pouvoir travailler avec mon ami et prédécesseur à l'environnement, Jonathan Wilkinson, qui est ministre des Ressources naturelles du Canada, alors que nous effectuons cette transition. Le fait que le ministre de l'Énergie du Canada participe de facto à la COP26 est un geste extrêmement significatif. L'énergie propre est la plus grande opportunité économique de ce siècle. Et le Canada a tout ce qu'il faut pour être un leader mondial avec tous les emplois et les opportunités économiques qui en découlent. Et c'est vraiment le message que le Canada voudra transmettre à la conférence de l'ONU au cours des 2 prochaines semaines. Canada is once again a constructive player in the international climate fight. But yes, we have to go further and we have to do it faster. But the fundamentals that we've put in place at home, carbon pricing that is rebated to Canadians, phasing out coal-fired electricity generation, and a clean fuel standard, those 3 measures alone, if adopted by the world, would go a long way to meeting the Paris targets. We also have some of the world's largest intact carbon pools in our boreal forest and muskeg, and are playing a role in preserving biodiversity on a global scale. That too is part of the climate fight. I look forward to meeting the Canadian delegation to COP26, especially Canada's youth delegation, Labour representatives, provincial governments, and representatives of national Indigenous organizations. In fact, I spoke with Nathan Obed of ITK last night as my first official call, and will be reaching out to others as soon as possible. And I look forward to working constructively with all jurisdictions in Canada and with the business and investment community as we increase our global leadership. La population nous a clairement dit que nous pouvons et devons en faire plus dans la lutte au changement climatique et nous devons accélérer le rythme. Il s'agit d'une occasion massive et transformatrice. C'est la plus grande opportunité de croissance de l'emploi du 21e siècle. Et mon travail consiste à procéder judicieusement de manière à faciliter la vie des travailleurs, à aider nos communautés, mais aussi pour le bien de mes 4 enfants, de vos enfants et pour le bien de notre environnement. Je me sens prêt et heureux à prendre vos questions. I would now be happy to take your questions. Merci.
Merci, Monsieur le ministre. Nous allons maintenant passer à la période de questions. We will now proceed to the Q&A portion of this media availability. Veuillez utiliser la fonction de lever la main pour poser une question. Nous vous demandons de vous en tenir à une question et un suivi par la suite. So please use the hand up to request a question. Please ensure you have one question and only one follow-up. If you are calling by phone, you will have to do *9 to raise a hand, and you can do *6 to unmute yourself afterwards. So I will call out the first person with the name I see on screen. So if it's a telephone number, I will say the telephone number. Please state your name and your media, and be sure to unmute yourself. Je vais dire le nom ou le numéro de téléphone que je vois à l'écran ici. S'il vous plaît, mentionnez votre nom et votre média avant de poser votre question, s'en tenir à une question et un suivi. Merci beaucoup. Alors, on commence avec la première question. Monsieur Jean-Thomas Léveillé de la presse. Monsieur Léveillé, s'il vous plaît, vous enlevez de sourdine pour votre question pour Monsieur le ministre.
Bonjour, M. Guilbeault. Je voulais savoir quel est votre niveau d'optimisme ou de pessimisme à l'égard de cette COP qui va commencer en fin de semaine. Le premier ministre Boris Johnson, qui était très optimiste au départ, commence à montrer des signes de pessimisme. Je voulais savoir ce qu'il y en est pour vous.
C'est une bonne question. Je pense qu'on a parfois tendance à regarder ces conférences comme on regarderait une partie de hockey ou de football. Donc, est-ce qu'il va y avoir des gagnants? Alors que je pense que l'approche la plus prudente face aux Nations Unies et aux négociations sur le climat, c'est de voir ça comme un continuum. Alors, parfois, ça va mieux, parfois, ça va moins bien, mais c'est pas parce que ça va pas aussi bien qu'on ne l'aurait espéré que rien ne ressortira de la conférence. Et je pense qu'on sait déjà qu'il y a un élément, l'un des éléments névralgiques de cette conférence-là, l'un des objectifs névralgiques qui sera atteint, celui du 100 milliards de dollars que les pays industrialisés se sont engagés à verser aux pays en voie de développement lors de la conférence de Copenhague en 2009. C'est pas je peux difficilement passer sous silence le travail de mon excellent collègue et ami Jonathan Wilkinson, à qui la présidence britannique a demandé de co-présider donc ce groupe de travail-là avec son homologue allemand. Donc, on a demandé au Canada de co-présider un groupe de travail sur l'un des éléments les plus névralgiques de la conférence. Alors, pour ceux et celles qui pensent que la communauté internationale ne fait plus confiance au Canada, je pense que ce geste-là, à lui seul, nous démontre clairement le contraire. Moi, je vous assure que pendant toutes les années un peu où j'allais aux conférences des Nations Unies, on ne demandait pas au Canada de co-présider un groupe de travail sur quoi que ce soit, même pas sur l'heure de la journée, tellement la communauté internationale avait peu confiance en nous. Alors, je pense que ça démontre bien que les choses ont changé. Bon, Cela étant, ce sont des négociations qui sont difficiles. On voit que c'est pas tout le monde qui est prêt à faire plus et plus vite. Alors, c'est sûr que la négociation sert à ça, à essayer de voir comment on peut essayer d'amener tout le monde à faire plus et plus vite. Moi, je pense qu'il est un peu tôt pour poser un diagnostic sur ce qu'aura été la conférence. Je pense qu'on a 2 semaines très, très remplies de négociations devant nous. Et je propose qu'on se reparle de ce diagnostic-là vers la fin de la conférence.
D'accord. Et en sous-question, je voulais savoir, le gouvernement du Québec a dit qu'il entendait vous convaincre des vertus écologiques du 3e lien entre Lévis et Québec. Est-ce que vous pensez qu'ils vont y arriver?
Je pense que sur ce projet-là, c'est pas dans le cadre d'une conversation sur le coin de la table qu'on va décider si, d'un point de vue écologique, c'est un bon projet ou un mauvais projet. Nous avons mis en place depuis 2019 au Canada, un régime d'évaluation environnementale très rigoureux. Ce projet-là, lorsqu'il sera présenté au gouvernement fédéral, ce qui n'est pas encore le cas, mais lorsqu'il le sera, le projet fera l'objet d'une évaluation d'impact. N'en déplaise à certains, là, écoutez, c'est un projet qui traverse l'un des plus grands cours d'eau au pays. Alors, c'est clair qu'il va y avoir une évaluation d'impact fédéral sur ce projet-là. Et l'évaluation nous permettra de mettre en lumière la nature écologique ou non de ce projet-là.
Merci.
Merci beaucoup. La prochaine question est pour Christopher Reynolds. Please state your name and your media and unmute yourself.
Hi, Minister Guilbeault. Chris Reynolds with Canadian Press. Thanks for taking our questions. I know you've said in the past that the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion was something that should likely not go ahead. This was a few years ago now. That it could lead to an increase in emissions if it did. And now that you are in the position of Environment Minister, I'm wondering where you stand on this pipeline.
My position on the pipeline is, when I came into politics in 2019, we had already bought a pipeline. I've said since then that I wasn't going to rewrite history. I think what's important is to look at what we're doing to reduce emissions in Canada. And we're doing a number of significant things. In my remarks, I talked about carbon pricing, for example. I could talk about the fact that we're adopting very aggressive, in fact, we're the country with the most aggressive methane targets for 2030, reducing methane emissions by 75%. No other country has done that. And during the last election campaign, we've taken a series of very ambitious commitments, including putting in place a cap on oil and gas emissions. So clearly, and frankly, no one else has done that either in the world, let alone oil-producing nations. So what this means is, so we will cap emissions from the sector. Oh, I think we've. Oh, sorry, my apologies. Technical glitch. So no other countries, let alone an oil-producing nation like us, has proposed to put in place a cap on emission. Why are we doing that? Because we recognize that it's 25% of our emissions, and despite all the things that we've done so far, we need to do more. So regardless of what projects are happening in Canada in terms of oil and gas, well, we will be putting in place this cap, which will make sure that the emissions are first capped and then will be reduced over time. And we will be calling on our NEP Advisory Board to give us guidance as to how we could do that. And we will be calling on them to do that very soon. So we're putting in place more measures to ensure that emissions in Canada, and specifically emissions from the oil and gas sector, are going to go down.
On another pipeline, Line 5, that runs between Michigan and Ontario, I know that some officials in Canada, such as Premier Doug Ford, have sided with Enbridge in insisting that it's safe to keep this pipeline running. This pipeline that carries oil on the bottom of the Straits of Mackinac. I'm also wondering if you are in support of keeping this this vital pipeline open, or if you believe this is actually sort of a ticking time bomb, as the Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer has characterized it.
It's my fourth day on the job. There's lots of things I haven't had a chance to dive into. I've always been of the opinion, it's true now, it was true before I came into politics, that the way we're going to solve climate change is by doing it through a fair transition, which means that, we're using lots of fossil fuel products. My own province of Quebec, we consume about 360,000 barrels of oil every year. So should we shut down Line 5, Quebec would still be consuming 360,000 barrels of oil a year, and we wouldn't solve anything in terms of our oil consumption. So of course we need to work on reducing emissions from the production of the oil and gas sector, but we also have, and that's one of the things that our government has been doing like no other governments before, we're also working at the consumption level, historic investment in public transit. We're the first government ever to have an ongoing program to fund active transportation, which allows people like me to use bike lanes when they come to work, like I did this morning, for example. And that's happening across the country. We're investing in electrification of our transportation system, including the use of electric vehicles. So we obviously have to work on what's happening at the production level in terms of emission, but we also need to do more in terms of consumption.
Merci. La prochaine question est Catherine Lévesque. Donc, Catherine Lévesque, s'il vous plaît, enlevez la sourdine pour votre question.
Oui, merci beaucoup. Bonjour, Monsieur Guilbeault. Pour en revenir à la COP26, je voulais savoir, est-ce qu'on sait à ce moment-ci si la Chine y participera et qu'est-ce qu'une absence d'un représentant ou du président chinois à la COP26 voudrait dire là, pour le monde entier? J'imagine que ce serait une mauvaise nouvelle.
Non, il y aura une délégation chinoise importante qui sera à la conférence de Glasgow. Le président chinois a effectivement annoncé qu'il n'y serait pas, mais cela étant, là, il y aura nombreuses délégations chinoises. Écoutez, je pense que nous aurions souhaité certainement au Canada que le président Xi Jinping soit de la partie à la conférence de Glasgow. La plupart des chefs d'État et de gouvernement y seront. Évidemment, le premier ministre Trudeau, je l'accompagnerai pour les 2 premiers jours. Et clairement, nous devons tous et toutes faire plus. Alors, je suis pas dans une position pour faire la leçon à un pays ou à un autre, mais je suis le premier à reconnaître qu'au Canada, nous devons faire plus. Et l'ensemble des grands émetteurs de la planète, ce qui inclut bien évidemment le plus grand émetteur qui est maintenant la Chine, doit également faire plus en matière de lutte au changement climatique. Donc, il eût été souhaitable que le président chinois soit là. Cela étant, il y aura une délégation chinoise présente à Glasgow.
OK, donc en tout cas, si vous avez peut-être une analyse de la situation, qu'est-ce que ça voudrait envoyer comme message, je serais preneuse. Mais je voulais aussi vous demander, donc vous l'avez dit, c'est votre 4e journée, en fait, là, comme ministre de l'Environnement. Est-ce que vous vous sentez prêt, personnellement, à cette COP26? Ou est-ce que vous auriez aimé peut-être avoir plus de temps pour vous préparer?
Je vous mentirais si je vous dirais que se préparer pour une conférence comme ça, c'est facile. C'est jamais facile. Je l'ai dit tout à l'heure, c'est ma 19e. Ma première conférence de l'ONU sur les changements climatiques était la première COP en 1995 à Berlin. Alors, c'est certain qu'en termes de contenu, je possède quand même assez bien, même si depuis 2 ans, je suivais ça d'un peu plus loin, mais je possède quand même assez bien le contenu. Mais là, évidemment, mon rôle va être très différent de celui que j'ai occupé dans le passé, où j'étais généralement assis dans le fond de la salle avec la société civile. Là, je vais être assis à la place du Canada comme représentant et comme chef de la délégation canadienne. Alors, évidemment, il y a ce bout-là que je dois apprendre rapidement au cours des prochains jours. Cela étant, je suis appuyé par une équipe extraordinaire en Environnement et Changement climatique Canada, des gens que je connais dans bien des cas depuis des décennies, certainement, dans certains cas, quelques décennies. Alors, nous avons une équipe de négociateurs chevronnés, dévoués à cette question-là. Et alors, je pense que nous sommes, il me reste encore une journée pour me préparer. Disons, nous serons prêts lorsque j'arriverai samedi à Glasgow, dimanche, pardon, à Glasgow.
Merci. La prochaine question est pour Travis. Travis, please state your name and media and also unmute your mic. We lost Travis. So let's do the next caller, which is Ryan. Ryan, can you state your name and media and also unmute your mic?
Yeah, hi there. This is Ryan Tumblety with the National Post. Minister, I'm wondering, out of this summit, Canada has a plan that has been endorsed as being able to meet our 2030 targets and putting us on the right track. Are we going to be offering more than our existing plan at this summit?
When you say more than our existing plan, you mean specifically targets?
Targets or new measures or new steps to meet those targets beyond the carbon tax and the other steps that you've already announced.
So the way it works is that countries are being asked to submit their national targets and international contributions to climate finance ahead of these conference, which is exactly what we did last spring, which is when we submitted our new and revised targets for 2030, which were announced at the President Biden Earth Summit on April 22nd last spring. So that is Canada's position right now. That is our target right now. We will be talking about some new measures that are not in our plan, which were announced during the last election campaign. I spoke earlier about the cap on emissions from the oil and gas sector. I could also mention the fact that we've made the commitment to eliminate fossil fuel subsidies 2 years earlier than our G20 partners. The target at the G20 is to phase out those subsidies by 2025. We've committed to doing that by 2023. So we will be presenting these new measures, but we're not presenting a new target at this COP. The target has already been presented already as part of our submission last spring.
Any follow-up question?
Yeah, sorry. You talked in your opening remarks about the benefits that the West and oil-producing regions of Canada can see from the transition. I'm wondering if you can expand on that a little bit. These are big industries in some parts of the country. Where do you see the potential benefit for them as we reduce carbon?
Let me give you an example. If we were to ask most Canadians where they think that there's right now the most renewable energy development, some would probably say Quebec. Others would likely say BC or Ontario. It's none of these three provinces. The province in Canada that is right now receiving the most investment in renewable energy development is Alberta. That's where we're seeing the most wind energy being developed. One of the world's largest solar plant is being built in Alberta right now, with funds from investors from Wall Street, from Bay Street, from organizations all across the country, venture capital fund, institutional investors, and so this is what the transformation looks like. Now, obviously, we need to do more of that, and we need to ensure that these regions that will be most affected by those transformations have a pathway towards job creation, towards prosperity. And that's when I talk about fair transition, that's what we mean. And I'm not saying, we found all the answers, we're working on it. And my job as environment minister is to work with everyone across the country who wants to work on this transformation and who wants to work on fighting climate change.
Merci. Alors, la prochaine question est d'un numéro de téléphone. The next question is a telephone number, 514-288-2777. Please state your name and media. S'il vous plaît, dire votre nom et média. Oh, la question est partie. On prend la prochaine question qui est 613-992-6517. Please state your name and media before asking your question. And unmute yourself.
Can you hear me, Mr. Guilbeault?
Yes.
Excellent. It's Tom Korski with Blacklock's Reporter.
Oh.
I don't know if he's still there. I can't hear him anymore.
Please unmute yourself.
I have 3 times. How am I doing?
It's working now.
Minister, I wanted to ask, you obviously want to lower emissions. You believe the carbon tax lowers emissions. I don't understand how the carbon tax rebate for householders lowers emissions. Can you explain, how does the rebate lower emissions?
Well, I mean, I would be happy if you wish to give you a specific briefing on carbon pricing mechanism and how the carbon tax and rebate works. But basically, by putting a price on carbon, you're sending a signal to the market, to investors, to companies that carbon producing products will be more and more expensive going forward. And low-emitting technologies will not. So you start moving investment from some sectors to others. The reason we're doing the rebate is because we want to make sure that families don't have to bear the brunt of this. So people then get the money, and they can decide as part of their everyday habits to continue doing what they're doing, and you know, they will be compensated by that in terms of their fossil fuel emissions. Or they can decide to start adopting more environmentally friendly habits, which means that at the end of the day, they will have more money in their pockets. And that's obviously a personal decision that Canadian households and Canadians will make. But this is how we reduce emissions. But if you talk to any economist who've worked on climate change, and we have a great many in Canada, they will tell you that putting a price on pollution is one of the most effective way of reducing emissions. Not the only one, but certainly one of the most effective.
So my follow-up is, Minister, it's really the rebates that are of interest because, as you know, transportation, that's people just driving back and forth to work. And natural gas for home heating, that's the majority source of home heating in our country. People would never get rid of their natural gas furnace or drive halfway to work as long as they think they are, according to your mathematics, getting more money in a rebate than they're paying in the carbon tax. Isn't it the case that if you plan to lower emissions, at some point, you have to get rid of the rebates?
I'm not suggesting that people drive halfway to work, clearly. But the people could decide to go for more energy efficient vehicle. And that would be one of the ways, and transportation is about 25% of our emissions, so that it's a very important sector. And we're working to making those vehicles more affordable by especially working with the Americans to ensure that we have higher standards for energy efficiency for vehicles. We're working to make electric vehicles more affordable. And in some provinces, my own province of Quebec, it's almost 10% of sales now that are electric vehicles or plug-in hybrids. In British Columbia, it's 12, if not 13%. So this transformation is happening, and it's not just happening in Canada. In Norway, 50% of vehicles being sold are electric vehicles or plug-in hybrids. I could talk about China. I could talk about so many. So the transportation sector is going through this transformation that I was talking about, and Canada is not isolated from that transformation.
Merci, thank you. Next question will be for Travis. Travis, please unmute yourself and state your name and your media.
Thank you. Minister, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate you taking our questions today. One of the criticisms of these conferences has been that there's a lot of talk and sometimes commitments aren't followed through on. Do you think that we need to go back to a system where it's not just public shaming that is a consequence, that there are trade sanctions in place for countries that don't meet their targets?
I mean, we're trying to tackle one of humanity's greatest challenge. and it's even more complicated than other environmental negotiations that we've seen on the international scene, such as the phasing out of CFCs, for example, where we had very, I won't call them simple, but certainly simpler technical solutions. It was a very specific problem. Fossil fuels are present in pretty much every of our society's sectors all around the world. So it is complex. You have, depending on the conference, but anywhere between 140 to 180, sometimes more countries that are participating. So it's a very complex thing. There's no two ways about it. I don't think that public shaming is for those who do not do what they said they would is the only thing that happens, because right now what we're seeing is that, and I was alluding to that in my remarks earlier, the economy of the 21st century will be a green economy, and that's becoming very, very clear. And it's not just environmentalists talking about this, but more and more business people and certainly the investment community. We're seeing very large investors, pension funds, institutional investors saying we're moving away from fossil fuels and we're moving into clean technologies, into renewable energy, into public transit. We've heard the Caisse de dépôt et placement say that they were pulling all of their investment out of oil in the coming two weeks. And it would be too easy to say that it's just a Caisse de dépôt et placement, because this is a worldwide movement. So not being willing to tackle the issue of climate change is certainly an environmental issue. It's a social issue, but it's becoming more and more about what will the economic development of your country look like, and what kind of opportunities will you be missing if you refuse to do that. And the last thing I will say is that there are increasing discussions about things like border tax adjustment. We've heard the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance Freeland, speak about this, certainly with her counterpart in the US, Janet Yellen. The European Union is looking into this. So there is a conversation happening about going even beyond some of the measures that were adopted in the past to try and ensure that everyone is doing its fair share.
Thank you for that. As a follow-up, I have a question from 16-year-old Aliyah Kirji. She's a climate activist who is going to COP, and she said that she wants her voice heard, especially for young people. This is her question. She says, "You know all too well that the government has consistently ignored the demands for climate ambition from its people. What is your plan to ensure the people, especially young people, are heard by all members of parliament when it comes to issues of climate justice?" So what would you say to her and young people like her?
Well, there's many things I could say, but we value so much the point of view and the opinion and certainly the energy of our youth that we've reserved six spaces on the Canadian delegation for youth. It's not every country that does that, but because we think that they can contribute. In fact, a youth representative a long time ago, you might argue, on the Canadian delegation, but I understand the importance and the value that youth can contribute to these debates, and that's why we're specifically reserving space on the Canadian delegation for them and for their voices to be heard.
Merci. La prochaine question est de Laurence Martin. Laurence, s'il vous plaît, votre média.
Oui, bonjour, Laurence Martin de Radio-Canada. Vous m'entendez bien?
Très bien.
Dans la délégation canadienne, il y a évidemment M. Legault qui entend construire un troisième lien. On en a parlé un peu plus tôt, qui, selon certains rapports médiatiques aujourd'hui, n'aurait pas consulté les environnementalistes avant de partir. Quel message est-ce que ça envoie d'après vous?
Je ne dirais pas à M. Legault comment faire son travail. Ce que je peux vous dire, c'est que pour nous, l'opinion des écologistes, mais aussi, je parlais des jeunes il y a quelques minutes, du mouvement syndical, des provinces, des Premières Nations, des municipalités. Donc, nous invitons ces ces gouvernements, ces organisations-là sur la délégation canadienne. Donc, nous réservons sur la délégation canadienne 6 sièges pour les représentants des ONG, 6 pour les jeunes également. Puisque je le disais dans mes remarques tout à l'heure, mais je pense que les écologistes, le mouvement écologiste joue un rôle très important dans une société comme la nôtre et c'est parfois inconfortable. Je serai à certains moments probablement critiqué. Je l'ai déjà été par certains de mes ex-collègues. Et dans une démocratie, c'est tout à fait sain. Et c'est très important. Alors pour nous, nous voulons leur faire une place. Nous voulons entendre ce qu'ils ont à dire. Aux autres de faire les choix qui leur conviennent.
Mm-hmm. Mais est-ce que vous diriez que vous et M. Legault êtes sur la même longueur d'onde ou avez une vision commune, la même vision quand il est question de stratégie pour la lutte contre les changements climatiques?
Je pense que je suis pas le premier à le dire. Là. En fait, je l'ai déjà dit lorsque j'étais du côté des écologistes, mais le Québec a fait beaucoup en matière de lutte au changement climatique. Nous avons été la première province, le premier État, si vous voulez, en Amérique du Nord à mettre un prix sur la pollution. Nous avons, en matière d'électrification des transports, la bourse du carbone. Donc, le Québec a posé un certain nombre de gestes très, très audacieux au cours des dernières années. Mais cela étant, ce n'est pas parce qu'on a bien fait dans le passé que l'on peut s'asseoir sur nos lauriers et dire, bon, ben bravo, c'est fini, c'est réglé. Alors, tout le monde doit faire plus. Nous devons faire plus au Canada et l'ensemble des grands émetteurs de la planète doivent faire plus également. Alors, je pense que là-dessus, sur la nécessité de lutter contre les changements climatiques, il y a certainement beaucoup de terrain d'entente entre le gouvernement du Québec et le gouvernement du Canada. J'ai déjà parlé à M. Charette à plusieurs reprises, à la fois dans mon ancien rôle comme ministre du Patrimoine. Nous ne sommes pas encore parlé depuis au cours des 4 derniers jours, mais j'ai très hâte de le voir. C'est quelqu'un que je connais depuis longtemps et avec qui je m'entends très bien. Donc, je pense que sur certaines choses, nous allons pouvoir travailler ensemble avec le gouvernement du Québec. Cela étant, il y a des choses sur lesquelles on ne s'entend pas nécessairement.
Merci beaucoup. The next question and the last of this media availability would be for Theophilus. Please unmute yourself and state your media.
Hi, Theo Argytis, Bloomberg News. Good morning, Minister Guilbeault.
Good morning.
I just wanted to do a quick follow-up on the Line 5 question because the Canadian government's position on Line 5 is pretty unambiguous. Can you tell us whether you support Line 5, the Line 5 pipeline or not?
My government has announced in the past that we supported the continued operation of Line 5.
Thank you.
Do you have a follow-up question?
But you didn't say that whether you supported it or not. You said your government has supported it.
Being part of the government, I support my government's position.
Right. Thank you.
We have time for one last question. Cormac McSweeney, please unmute yourself and state your media.
Yes, Cormac McSweeney with City News. Just wanted to quickly ask you on the COP26 summit itself again, if you could repeat in English what you had said in French when you were asked whether you're optimistic or pessimistic about the outcomes of this conference and whether other countries will be able to commit to what you're looking for, the same level that Canada has in terms of targets and action to deal with climate change.
I'd say at this point, having been to a number of these meetings, I'm cautiously optimistic. I mean, we have 2 weeks of negotiations ahead of us. Heads of government and heads of state, a great number of them will be there. We'll have ministers of the energy, ministers of finance, ministers of transportation, ministers of the environment. So that there's going to be an important, certainly one of the most important diplomatic efforts to try and find pathways so we can accelerate the fight against climate change. And one could argue that it's probably the most important diplomatic effort like that since the Paris conference in 2015. So clearly, the fact that all these people are going to Glasgow is a sign that the governments around the world want to try and find a solution now, or solutions. Now, it's not. That being said, it's not always enough to show up. We can't always agree, but I'm confident, and the fact that we already have an agreement to achieve the $100 billion per year of investment from industrialized nations to help developing countries face climate change. I think that's a significant step forward, something we collectively at the international scene hadn't been able to achieve since 2009. And I mean, I'm going to brag a little bit, but Canada is part of the reason why this achievement came about. The work of my friend and colleague Jonathan Wilkinson was key in making that happen. Obviously, his German counterpart played an important role. The UK presidency as well, but we've already found a solution to a very tricky element of the negotiations, to which we hadn't been able to find a solutions for more than 10 years. So for me, that's very encouraging.
Okay, and in terms of what Canada is going to announce in terms of domestic measures at COP26, you have already ruled out any new targets. That what we set in the spring, the 40 to 45% is the target that we have going into this, and we'll have coming out of it. But you said that we will hear more about the plans in regards to oil and gas, the cap and cut plan for oil and gas that we heard in the election campaign. So I'm wondering, what will we hear on that promise that we didn't hear in the election? If you can elaborate on that a little bit, and will that include financial supports for the oil and gas sector to help them make that transition moving forward with these new targets that you have for them in cutting emissions?
If I gave the impression that we would be defining those campaign commitments, then that was not my intention. I mean, the way it works, we will obviously have to do consultations with provinces and territories, industry, civil society, indigenous or organizations to develop and define those measures. I've said that we would be calling on our Net Zero Advisory Board to do that, but the fact that these measures were announced as part of an election campaign, but what we will be doing is we will be confirming on the world stage these measures, this commitment that Canada is taking to go further and faster in the fight against climate change.
Merci beaucoup. That concludes the question period. Ça conclut maintenant la période de questions. On vous souhaite une excellente journée. We hope you have a really good day. And Minister, good luck at COP. Bonne chance à la COP 26.
Merci beaucoup, Gabrielle. Thank you, everyone. Merci.